The first time Julian Cross saw her again, it wasn't at a gala or a board meeting. It was under the harsh lights of a children's hospital. At 2:11 a.m., and his whole world was falling apart. His baby was burning with fever. Alarms kept chirping. His hands that signed billion-dollar deals couldn't stop shaking. And there she was, black skin glowing under fluorescent white, hair tied back with tired precision, eyes locked on the crib like a promise. Nia James didn't look up to greet him. She looked up to protect the child they made. Julian was white, rich, and worshipped by headlines. He was the man who never lost control, never raised his voice, never needed anyone. He didn't trust strangers, lovers, even friends. He trusted contracts, cameras, and silence. 3 years ago, he had trusted Nia with the softest parts of him. Then he broke her heart and called it practical. Now his phone had dragged him here with one sentence he couldn't buy his way out of. "Your son is getting worse. Come now." He'd arrived in a tailored coat that cost more than most people's rent. But inside this hospital, money didn't quiet the machines. And it didn't cool a baby's skin. The nurse at triage glanced at him, then at the baby in his arms, then at the nanny hovering behind. Her smile was practiced, polite, the kind reserved for people who donate wings. "We'll get you in quickly, Mr. Cross," she said, already typing his name like it was a password. Julian nodded, too stiff to thank her. He hated gratitude. It sounded like need. His son Micah was only 9 months old, too small to understand fear, but old enough to feel it. Micah's cheeks were flushed, his breath shallow, his tiny fingers weakly clutching Julian's shirt. Julian pressed his lips to Micah's forehead and flinched. The heat was unreal, like the child was made of fire. They rushed him down a hall that smelled like bleach and panic. A curtain snapped closed, a monitor beeped. A resident rattled off numbers like prayer. Julian stared at the 4-needle going into his baby's hand and felt something in him crack. Control wasn't a skill in this room. It was a lie. "We need the attending," the resident said. "The pediatric attending is on nights," the nurse added. "Already paging." Julian's jaw tightened as if anger could defend his son. "Get the best one," he said, sharp and cold. Now he didn't ask. He commanded. That was how he survived. The curtain pulled back. And the attending walked in with a clipboard and a face Julian had tried to erase from memory. Nia James, his ex. The woman he never allowed himself to mention out loud. Black skin, dark eyes, calm hands, a white coat that looked earned, not borrowed. She stopped for half a breath when she saw him, then kept walking like the pause never happened. "Micah Cross," she said, voice steady. Julian couldn't answer. He couldn't swallow. Nia stepped to the crib, glanced at the monitors, then at Micah's face, and her expression changed. Not shock, not anger. Something older and more dangerous. Love sealed tight behind professionalism. "This is a high fever," Nia said. "We're moving fast." Julian heard the words, but only watched her hands. She lifted Micah gently, checking his neck, his ears, his belly. Micah whimpered, then softened when she touched him, like her palm was a memory his body trusted. Julian's chest tightened with a jealousy so irrational it felt like grief. "You know him," Julian said before he could stop himself. Nia didn't look at Julian. She looked at Micah. "I'm his doctor tonight," she answered. "That's what matters." The sentence was clean, surgical. It cut without bleeding. Julian tried to lean into his usual armor, but the armor didn't fit here. It pinched and suffocated and made him feel like a stranger in his own child's crisis. He watched Nia speak to nurses with quiet authority. He watched her adjust Micah's blanket like it was sacred. And he felt the shame rise because the last time he saw her, he'd told her she was too emotional to fit in his world. 3 years ago, he had ended it in a penthouse kitchen with floor-to-ceiling glass. Nia had stood barefoot on marble that wasn't hers, holding a mug she didn't buy. She had asked him for time, for honesty, for a future that didn't feel like she was always waiting outside the door of his life. Julian had offered money instead. He had said, "Feelings are expensive. I don't invest in things I can't control." And Nia, with black skin and dignity he didn't deserve, had left without begging. Now she was back, not begging, not pleading, not performing, just working, just saving, just staying. Micah's fever spiked higher. The nurse called out the number, and Julian felt his vision tilt. He reached for the crib, then stopped, afraid his touch would ruin something. Nia placed a hand on Micah's chest and spoke softly, almost too low to hear. "Hey, baby, I'm here. Stay with me." Julian stared, stunned by the intimacy of those words. Not because she said them, because Micah believed them. Micah's tiny hand reached out, grabbed her finger, and held on. The monitor beeped steadily, but Julian's heart sounded louder than the machine's. They admitted Micah to pediatrics. Julian expected private rooms, special access, the hospital's quiet obedience to wealth. He got it, technically. A nicer room, faster labs. A head nurse who smiled too often. But none of that stopped the fear, just made it more humiliating, because power still couldn't fix the only thing that mattered. Night fell harder inside the hospital. The halls dimmed, but never darkened. Julian sat beside the crib, suit wrinkled, tie loosened, eyes burning from refusing sleep. He had ignored 20 calls from his CFO. He had canceled a merger meeting with a single text: family emergency. For the first time in his life, he didn't care how that sounded. At 1:40 a.m., Nia returned 4 rounds. Julian expected her to check the chart and leave. Instead, she adjusted Micah's 4 with the kind of patience that couldn't be faked. Then she sat down on the stool by the crib. Not for Julian. For Micah. Like the baby, deserved company, even when he slept. "You can go home," she said, without looking at Julian. Julian's voice came out raw. "I'm not leaving." Nia finally looked at him then, and her eyes were tired. Not cruel, not soft. Just tired. "You can't brute force illness," she said. "He needs rest. So do you." Julian almost laughed. He had brute forced everything else. He had brute forced boardrooms, lawsuits, grief. But his baby's body didn't negotiate. "I don't trust hospitals," Julian admitted, surprising himself. Nia's face didn't change. "I can tell." "I don't trust people," he added. Nia leaned forward slightly. "Then why did you come here at all?" Julian opened his mouth, ready with arrogance. But the truth landed before the words. "Because he's all I have," Julian said. "And I don't know what to do." His voice cracked at the end, like the sentence broke him. For a moment, the room became quieter than it should have been. The machine still beeped, but the tension shifted. Nia looked at Micah, then at Julian, and her voice lowered. "You don't have to know everything," she said. "You have to stay." Then she turned back to the monitors like she hadn't just taught him a new language. At 2:11 a.m., Micah stirred and cried out, a thin, pained sound. Julian shot up so fast, his chair scraped the floor. Kia was already there. She lifted Micah with practiced gentleness and rocked him. Micah fought for a second, then collapsed against her shoulder, sobbing quietly. Julian watched, stunned, as the baby calmed like someone had turned down the world. "You did that," Julian whispered. Nia's eyes stayed on Micah. "He's sick. He's scared." Julian's throat tightened. "He doesn't calm for me like that." Nia's jaw flexed, just once. "He's 9 months old. He's learning. So are you." Julian felt insult flare, then die, because she wasn't mocking him. She was telling him the truth without cruelty, the way people do when they've had to survive being misunderstood. The hours dragged. Nia checked Micah every hour, even when it wasn't required. Julian watched her stand at the crib, shoulders squared, eyes heavy, refusing to leave. At 4:30 a.m., Julian saw her press 2 fingers to her own temple, as if holding herself together. At 5:10 a.m., he saw her reread Micah's lab results like she didn't trust the world to be kind. By sunrise, Micah's fever finally began to drop. Julian exhaled like he'd been drowning. His phone buzzed again, and for the first time he answered. His CFO's voice was furious. "Where are you?" "Investors are asking." Julian cut him off. "My son is in the hospital." "Handle it." Then he hung up. No apology, no explanation. Just a boundary. A new one. Nia returned with fresh updates and a cup of water she placed silently near Julian's hand. The kindness hit him harder than her anger ever could have. He stared at the cup like it was evidence of who she was, of who he hadn't been. "You're still doing this?" Julian said. Nia blinked slowly. "Doing what?" "Being like this," he said, gesturing helplessly. "Staying, caring." Nia's expression hardened, but her voice stayed calm. "Black women don't get praised for caring," she said. "We get used for it." The sentence landed heavy, the way truth does when it isn't designed to comfort. Julian's face flushed. He wanted to protest, to defend himself, to claim he wasn't like that. But the past stood between them like a wall he built with his own hands. He had enjoyed her warmth when it was convenient, then called it neediness when it required commitment. He had benefited from her softness, then punished her for having it. Micah slept longer that morning. Doctors shifted, nurses changed. The hospital moved like a machine. But Nia came back again that night, even though her shift ended at 6. Julian saw her in the hallway, still in her white coat, arguing quietly with a supervisor. He heard the word coverage and policy and liability. Then he saw Nia step into Micah's room anyway, as if rules were smaller than love. Julian stood up. "You're off duty." Nia's eyes flicked to him. "I'm aware. Why are you here?" Julian asked. Nia walked to the crib, checked Micah's breathing, then spoke without turning. "Because sometimes hospitals don't hear black mothers," she said softly. Then she corrected herself, like it cost her something. "Black women, black families. We get ignored until it's too late." Julian's stomach dropped, because the sentence wasn't abstract, it was personal. It sounded like a wound, like history, like a story she had lived more than once. He realized he didn't know the full shape of her life, even when he claimed he loved her. That night, Micah's oxygen dipped. An alarm screamed, sharp and sudden. A nurse rushed in. Julian froze. Nia didn't. She moved like instinct, adjusting Micah's position, calling respiratory, speaking fast and precise. Julian stood useless, heart hammering, watching his baby struggle. For 10 minutes, the room was chaos. Then the numbers climbed back up. Micah's breathing steadied. Julian's legs nearly gave out. Nia's hands were shaking when the crisis passed. She turned away from Julian, breathing hard, and Julian saw what she didn't want him to see. Fear. Not professional concern, personal terror. "You love him," Julian said, voice barely there. Nia didn't answer right away. Then she finally looked at him, eyes glossy but fierce. "I don't know how to stop," she said. Julian's chest caved in. He'd misjudged everything. Nia's love wasn't a demand, but a gift he treated like debt. Micah stabilized. "Strong little guy," the nurse said. Later, Julian asked, "Why didn't you tell me he was mine?" "I tried," Nia said. "They blocked me." Julian's world tilted. He remembered his security guards, his receptionist, his no interruptions rule. He remembered telling his staff to filter drama. He had built a fortress and called it professionalism. And it had swallowed her whole. "I didn't know," Julian whispered. Nia's eyes burned. "You didn't try to know." Then she looked at the crib, at Micah's sleeping face. "I raised him alone for 9 months," she said. "Working nights, studying, paying bills." She swallowed hard. Then he got sick, and the clinic sent us here. And your name popped up because you finally filed paternity after your private investigator found us. Julian flinched. The truth hurt because it was true. The reversal hit Julian like a punch. All this time, he thought he'd been the wronged one. All this time, he thought Naya disappeared out of spite. But she hadn't disappeared. She'd been pushed out. By systems he funded. By doors he locked. By people who protected his comfort over her humanity. Julian's voice broke. You're his mother. Naya stared at him. I always was. Julian's eyes fell to the floor. For the first time, he didn't reach for control. He reached for accountability. Micah woke that afternoon, weak but alert. He reached toward Nia. Then Julian, confused by their closeness. Julian leaned in and let Micah grip his finger. Something inside him surrendered not to love as a feeling, but to love as responsibility. That evening, a hospital administrator arrived with a clipboard and a hollow smile. This woman isn't listed as an approved guardian, she said, eyeing Nia. Julian felt anger rise, but he noticed Nia's posture, the practiced readiness to be dismissed. He stood. She's his mother, he said, loud enough for the nurses to hear. Our records are wrong, Julian snapped. Fix them. And if your system can't recognize a black mother beside her child, then your system is broken. Silence fell. Naya stared at him, unsure. Julian turned to her. I'm sorry. She didn't forgive. But she stayed. Over the next days, Julian didn't leave. He learned how to hold Micah, how to ask instead of command. He watched staff overlook Niath correct themselves when he listened. The truth made him sick. When Micah was cleared to go home, fear replaced relief. Julian followed Naya down the hall. I'm not asking for trust, he said. I'm asking to earn it. How? With action. He told her about the lawyer, the corrected records, shared custody. A funded advocacy program, not charity accountability. Naya searched his face. Why? Julian's voice broke. Because you were the only person here I trusted with our child, and that terrified me. Naya stared at him, and for the first time her anger softened into something else. Not forgiveness, recognition. Micah came home to Julian's townhouse that looked expensive but empty. The first night was chaos. Micah cried for hours, still weak, still confused. Julian's nanny tried, but Micah kept reaching toward the door. Then Naya showed up. Not because Julian deserved it, but because Micah needed it. Naya walked in wearing scrubs, hair wrapped, eyes exhausted. Julian stood in the living room, holding Micah like he was afraid to breathe wrong. I tried everything, he whispered. Nia didn't insult him. She didn't gloat. She simply stepped forward and took the baby. Micah calmed instantly, face pressed into her shoulder. Nia swayed slowly, humming under her breath. Julian watched, throat tight, and finally understood what love looked like when it wasn't a transaction. It looked like staying. Weeks passed, then months. The court hearing passed quietly. Julian made sure Naya didn't face it alone. He insisted her name be restored, not for gratitude, but for protection. His foundation launched a new hospital program, overnight family support, bias training, and advocacy staff in pediatrics. There were no cameras, no interviews. When the board pressed him, Julian said, "If I have to perform decency, you missed the point." Nia kept working, no longer invisible, not because Julian validated her, but because he removed barriers he had once ignored, and because her competence spoke clearly when the room stopped shrinking her. One night, after Micah slept, they stood at the window. Julian admitted he mistook distrust for strength. "It just made you alone," Naya said. She confessed she trusted too much and paid for it. "I won't ask you to forget," Julian said. "Just let Micah have both of us without war." Months later, at a staff event, the chief of pediatrics called Nia's name for exceptional care and leadership. The applause was real. On stage, Nia spoke calmly. "I've done this work while being underestimated. Tonight, I'm here because I am seen. Afterward, Julian met her in the hall, Micah in his arms. You were always the best part of my life, he said. I treated you like an option. Nia didn't offer romance. She offered a chance. I don't want to own you, Julian said. I want to stand beside you. Then stand, she replied. Because kindness isn't proven by what you feel, but by what you fix when you finally see who you ignored.